Be me, Anon. I'm 28. My job is to sit in a cubicle and make numbers on a screen change color from red to green. It pays the rent, so I can't complain. Or I can, but I do it silently, in my head. The office itself is a masterpiece of corporate blandness. The carpet is the color of a stormy sky, the lights buzz with the energy of a dying wasp, and the kitchen always has that lingering smell of someone else's questionable lunch choices. My life runs on a simple loop. Wake up, work, come home, lose myself in video games until I can't keep my eyes open, sleep. It's not a great life, but it's predictable. It's quiet. And for a while, that was all I needed. That all changed when they hired Kathy. She joined our team as a project coordinator sometime last spring. On her first day, you could already tell she was different. Most new hires are quiet. They try to learn the ropes, figure out the social dynamics before they show their real personality. Not Kathy. Day one, she's already decorating her cubicle, not with pictures of family or a dumb cat calendar. She puts up posters with slogans, things like, "The future is female," and one with a diagram of a bicycle with the caption, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Okay, a bit on the nose, but whatever. Live and let live. But it wasn't just decoration. It was a statement of intent. The first week, the subtle provocations started. It was small stuff at first, the kind of thing you'd feel weird for even pointing out. We have a communal printer. Someone would go to pick up their documents and find a freshly printed article left on top. The titles were always something like, "Confronting Your Unconscious Bias at Work," or 10 Ways Men Interrupt Women Without Realizing It. No one knew who was printing them, but we all knew. Some of the older guys would just look confused, read a paragraph, shake their heads, and throw it in the recycling bin. A couple of the younger guys, the eager-to-please types, would actually get into debates about it. They'd try to argue with her logically, using facts and figures. This was a huge mistake. It was like they were bringing a calculator to a poetry slam. She wasn't interested in a debate. She wanted a reaction. She'd hit them with a wall of jargon they didn't understand. That's a classic example of patriarchal conditioning, or "you're speaking from a place of immense privilege." The guy would just stand there, blinking, not knowing what to say, and Kathy would walk away with this little smirk. Victory. She was fueling up. Every argument, every defensive reaction was like a shot of espresso for her. This went on for a month or two. The office atmosphere started to change. Meetings became minefields. If a man explained a technical concept, Kathy would thank him in a super sarcastic tone for mansplaining it. It didn't matter if the explanation was necessary and directed at the whole team. Context was irrelevant. The men in the office split into 3 camps. Camp 1, the arguers. They kept trying to engage her, thinking they could reason with her. They lost every time, leaving the conversation frustrated and angry. Camp 2, the ghosts. They just tried to avoid her at all costs. They'd take longer routes to the kitchen, wait until she was away from her desk to go to the printer. Their work probably suffered because they were so focused on avoiding confrontation. Camp 3, the pandering. These were the worst. They'd go out of their way to agree with her, hoping to be seen as one of the good ones. They'd nod enthusiastically when she went on a rant, and use words like problematic in regular conversation. I was firmly in Camp 2, head down, headphones on, just trying to survive. Her little friend, another woman from a different department, was her biggest cheerleader. I'd see them by the water cooler, and Kathy would be recounting her latest victory. The friend would be nodding, telling her how brave she was for speaking truth to power. It was her own personal feedback loop. Then there was Dennis. Dennis was our best software developer. He was a quiet guy. Not shy, just efficient. He came in at 8:59 a.m., put on his noise-canceling headphones, and coded for 8 hours straight with a short break for lunch, which was always chicken and rice he brought from home. At 5:01 p.m., he packed his bag and left. I think he went to the gym or something. He was in good shape, but didn't talk about it. He was always polite. If you asked him a work-related question, he'd give you a clear, concise answer. He never engaged in office gossip. He was a professional. He was also, as it turned out, completely immune to Kathy's tactics. She saw him as the final boss. He was competent, respected, and didn't seem to care about anything but his work. He was the embodiment of the patriarchal structure she was fighting against. Her first attempt on him was a classic. We were in a team meeting. Kathy was outlining a feature she wanted for a new update. It was a vague, high-level concept. Dennis, being the lead developer, chimed in. He wasn't talking to her, but to the whole team. Okay, for that to be feasible, we'll need to refactor the user authentication module, and that will take at least 3 sprints. We should table this until next quarter. He wasn't being dismissive. He was just stating a logistical fact. That's his job. Kathy smiled that tight, predatory smile. "Thank you, Dennis," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I appreciate you taking the time to explain the technical side of my own idea to me. It's a very common dynamic." She looked around the room, expecting the usual awkward silence or for one of the panderers to nod in agreement. Dennis just looked at her. No anger, no defensiveness. Just a calm, neutral expression. He blinked once. I was outlining the development timeline for the project manager. My comment was about resource allocation, not the quality of the idea. Then he turned to the manager. "So, about the Q3 budget for server maintenance." He just moved on. He didn't acknowledge the accusation. He treated it like a bit of static on the line, an irrelevant piece of data. Kathy was left sitting there, mouth slightly open. Her cannon had fired, but the shell had just bounced off a wall of pure, unadulterated professionalism. I had to hide a smile behind my hand. It was the first time I'd seen her not get the reaction she wanted. She didn't give up. She saw it as a challenge. A few days later, I saw her walk over to his desk. She was holding one of her printouts. The title was something like, "Is Your Silence a Form of Complicity?" She placed it directly on his keyboard. He was away from his desk at the time. She walked away, and I could see her watching him from her own cubicle, waiting for him to come back. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. Dennis returned a few minutes later with a coffee. He saw the paper on his keyboard. He picked it up, glanced at the title for maybe half a second, and then, without breaking stride, dropped it into the recycling bin next to his desk. He didn't even sigh. He didn't roll his eyes. He treated it with the exact same level of importance as a used Post-it note. Then he sat down, put on his headphones, and started coding. From my desk, I could see Kathy's shoulders slump. It was a tiny movement, but it was there. This wasn't working. He wasn't angry. He wasn't intimidated. He just didn't care. Her attacks were having zero effect, so she decided to escalate. If subtlety wasn't working, she'd be more direct. She started targeting him in group emails. Dennis would send out a project update. It would be direct and to the point. "Team, the deadline for Module X is Friday. Make sure all your code is commented and submitted for review by 4 p.m. Kathy would reply all. "I think the tone of this email is unnecessarily aggressive. We should strive for a more collaborative and less demanding environment. This kind of top-down communication can be very harmful to team morale." The first time she did this, the whole office held its breath, waiting for the email war to begin. Dennis's response came 5 minutes later. He didn't reply all. He replied only to Kathy, and he CC'd our manager. "Noted. All future communications will remain professional and focused on project deadlines. Thank you for your feedback." It was a masterclass in corporate judo. He acknowledged her message without validating her complaint. He restated his commitment to being professional, implying that's what he was already doing. And by CCing the manager, he was creating a paper trail, showing that he was being reasonable while she was creating drama. The manager, a guy who cared about nothing but deadlines and budgets, never even responded. To him, the issue was closed. Kathy had no ground to stand on. She couldn't claim he was ignoring her, but she also got absolutely no emotional satisfaction. He was a black hole for her provocations. And then something interesting started to happen. The other guys in the office were watching. They saw what Dennis was doing. They saw that arguing didn't work. They saw that avoiding didn't work. They saw that pandering definitely didn't work. But they saw that Dennis's method, polite, professional, emotionless disengagement, was working perfectly. It wasn't a conscious decision, I don't think. Nobody held a meeting about it. It was more like herd immunity. One of the guys from Camp 1, a guy who used to get into shouting matches with her, was the first to try it. Kathy made some comment to him in the kitchen about how men always leave the coffee pot empty. Instead of arguing and pointing out that he literally just brewed a new pot, he just looked at her, gave a slight nod, and said, "I'll keep that in mind." Then he walked away. Kathy was left standing there with her mouth half open, ready to deliver a prepackaged speech on male entitlement. But her audience was gone. It started happening more and more. She'd try to bait someone into a conversation about toxic masculinity, and the guy would just say, "Huh, interesting perspective," and then immediately change the subject to a work-related issue. "Hey, while I have you, did you get a chance to look at that bug report I sent over?" Her power was based on her ability to control the frame of the conversation. But you can't control a conversation that no one is having with you. Her frustration became more and more visible. Her loud, confident pronouncements were replaced with muttered complaints to her friend. I'd overhear them talking. She wasn't bragging about her victories anymore. She was complaining about how the men had all become so passive-aggressive. She said they were creating a hostile work environment through their weaponized incompetence and malicious compliance. She was reframing their non-reaction as an attack in itself. In her mind, their refusal to engage with her was a deliberate, coordinated campaign of misogynistic bullying. The reality was much simpler. People just wanted to do their work in peace. Dennis had shown them how. She was like a magician whose audience had suddenly decided to stare at their phones instead of watching her tricks. The magic doesn't work if no one is paying attention. Her last-ditch effort before going to management was to try and corner Dennis publicly. It was during a daily stand-up meeting. Everyone is in a circle, giving their updates for the day. When it was Dennis's turn, he gave his usual update. "Yesterday I finished the back-end logic for the new feature. Today I'll be writing the unit tests. No blockers." Kathy, who was standing next to him, didn't wait for the next person to speak. She turned to him and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "It must be nice to have the privilege of just focusing on your tasks without having to constantly navigate the systemic biases of the workplace." The circle went dead silent. This was her big move, a public call-out. Everyone looked at Dennis. He didn't look at her. He looked at the next person in the circle. "All right, Mark, you're up." He just skipped her turn. Not out of malice. It was because, in his mind, she hadn't given a work-related update. She had said something irrelevant, so he logically moved on to the next person who would. Mark, startled, just started giving his update. Kathy was left standing there, completely bypassed. She had set up a public arena for a fight, and her opponent had simply walked out of it to go get a sandwich. Her face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. She had tried to make him the center of a drama she was writing, and he had refused to even be a character in her play. That afternoon, she booked a meeting with our manager. I saw the appointment in his public calendar. The subject was concerns about team culture. We all knew what was coming. This was her final move. She was going over our heads. She was going to use the system. And we all knew it was going to be aimed squarely at one person, Dennis. The next day, the atmosphere in the office was thick with unspoken tension. Everyone knew Kathy had gone to the manager. She walked around with a look of grim satisfaction, like a martyr who had finally made the noble sacrifice. She probably expected a company-wide email, a mandatory sensitivity training session, or at the very least, Dennis getting called into a closed-door meeting with HR. None of that happened. The manager, let's call him Bob, was a simple creature. Bob's entire worldview was based on spreadsheets and performance metrics. If the numbers were green, the world was good. If the numbers were red, the world was bad. He had the emotional complexity of a pocket calculator. He must have listened to Kathy's complaints, nodded in all the right places, and then looked at the data. And the data was clear. Dennis was his top performer. His code was clean, he never missed a deadline, and he solved problems nobody else could. The team's productivity had actually increased in the last couple of months, probably because people were spending less time walking on eggshells and more time working. So, from Bob's perspective, there was no problem to solve. Later that morning, Bob walked out of his office and made a beeline for our team area. Kathy sat up straighter, a little smile playing on her lips. This was it. Justice was coming. Bob walked right past her desk. He stopped at Dennis's cubicle. Dennis took off his headphones. "Dennis," Bob said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just wanted to let you know, your work on the new server migration was outstanding. You saved us a ton on overhead. Keep it up." He gave Dennis a firm pat on the shoulder. Dennis just nodded. "Glad it worked out. The new system is more efficient." And that was it. Bob walked away. It was such a simple, brutal, and unintentional display of power. Bob wasn't taking a side. He was just rewarding competence. In his world of numbers, Dennis was a valuable asset, and Kathy's feelings were a non-quantifiable variable. I glanced over at Kathy. The smug smile was gone. Her face was a blank mask of disbelief. She had played her trump card, appealed to the highest authority, and the system had not only failed to support her, it had actively rewarded her target right in front of her. The message was clear. Her narrative had no power here. After that, something broke in her. The provocations stopped, not gradually, but all at once. Like a switch had been flipped. The articles stopped appearing on the printer. The sarcastic comments in meetings vanished. The group emails about problematic tone ceased. She became a ghost. She would come in, sit at her desk with her headphones on, and do her work in silence. She ate lunch at her desk, staring at her screen. She left at 5 p.m. on the dot. She became what she had tried so hard not to be, just another cog in the machine. Her friend would try to talk to her, but Kathy would just give one-word answers. The vibrant, self-righteous energy was gone, replaced by a dull, hollowed-out apathy. It was strange. The office was peaceful again, but it was an eerie kind of peace. We had won, I guess, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like watching a fire burn itself out. We hadn't fought back. We hadn't argued. We hadn't even really defended ourselves. We just stopped providing the fuel. Dennis, of course, didn't seem to notice any difference. His routine was unchanged. His focus was absolute. He was a constant, a fixed point around which the drama had swirled and then dissipated. The final scene, the moment that really sticks with me, happened a couple of months later. It was late on a Friday. Most people had already left for the weekend. It was just me, Dennis, and Kathy left in our section of the office. It was almost silent, just the hum of the servers and the clicking of keyboards. Kathy had been working on a project that had run into a major technical snag. I knew she had been struggling with it all week. Bob had mentioned it in a team huddle, and the deadline was Monday morning. The pressure was on. Suddenly, I heard a quiet, frustrated sigh from her cubicle. Then, I saw her get up and walk over to Dennis's desk. My first thought was, oh no, here we go again. I braced myself for some final, desperate confrontation. She stood there for a moment, and he didn't seem to notice her. He was deep in his code. She finally spoke, and her voice was quiet, almost timid. "Dennis, I'm sorry to bother you." He slowly took off his headphones and turned to her. His expression was neutral, as always. He just waited. "I can't get this API to authenticate," she said, her voice wavering a little. "I've been trying for 2 days. I've read all the documentation. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. The deadline is Monday." She wasn't being accusatory. She wasn't being sarcastic. For the first time since I'd met her, she was just asking for help. Dennis was silent for a few seconds. He looked at her, then at her screen, which was visible from his desk. He didn't say, "You should have asked sooner." He didn't say, "That's not my project." He didn't bring up any of the past drama. He just stood up, walked over to her desk, and pulled up a chair. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and even. "Let's take a look. It's probably a missing header in the request." He sat next to her, and they both stared at the screen. He pointed at a line of code, and she leaned in to see. He started explaining the problem to her in a clear, straightforward way. There was no condescension in his voice. He was just a developer helping a colleague. He was treating her like a professional. I watched them for a few minutes. He would type something, explain why he was doing it, and she would nod, taking it all in. It was the most normal, productive, and human interaction I had ever seen between them. I packed up my things and left them there, working together in the quiet twilight of the empty office. As I walked to my car, it all clicked into place. Kathy's entire identity at work was built on a foundation of conflict. She defined herself by what she was fighting against. She saw the world, or at least our office, as a battlefield between enlightened people like her and the ignorant, toxic men. But the men in the office, led by Dennis's unintentional example, refused to be her enemy. We didn't engage. We didn't fight back. We didn't even acknowledge the war she was trying to start. You can't be a warrior without an opponent. You can't be a victim without an oppressor. When we denied her the conflict she craved, her entire persona collapsed. There was nothing left. She wasn't defeated by anger or logic or debate. She was defeated by indifference. The ultimate irony was that in the end, the only way she could get the attention of the man she saw as her chief adversary was by dropping the ideology and just asking for his help on a technical problem. He had been willing to engage with her on a professional level all along. That's all he was ever interested in. The rest of it was just noise to him. She had to become a colleague to be treated like one. I heard they fixed the bug that night. She met her deadline. Things didn't magically get better. She didn't become friends with everyone. She was still quiet, still kept to herself. But the war was over, because one side had simply refused to show up to the battle. She still works here. I see her in the kitchen sometimes. We nod at each other. Dennis got promoted to team lead a while back. He's good at it. He's fair, he's efficient, and he doesn't care about anything but the quality of the work. Sometimes I think about it all. Kathy came in armed for a culture war, expecting to find soldiers of the patriarchy. Instead, she just found a bunch of tired guys who wanted to do their jobs, and Dennis, a guy who just wanted to code. Turns out that was a weapon she had no defense against,